This marks the day when two of the most celebrated cinematic titans clash. On one side, Greta Gerwig, the indie arthouse icon who has shaped the independent filmmaking scene and is responsible for the skyrocketing sales of red-colored hair dye over the past few years. On the other hand, Christoper Nolan, the visionary architect who is in the constant pursuit of challenging the cinematic art form and responsible for shaping the letterboxd accounts of the film bros. Barbie, the pink-fueled and vibrant fun fest. Oppenheimer, the harrowing nuclear biopic. Let's talk about Barbenheimer. What a time to be alive for cinema. Who would have thought that releasing Barbie and Oppenheimer on the same day single-handedly became one of the most brilliant marketing tactics of our time? I mean, the two have obvious competition with one another, and yet the box office says otherwise. Cinemas were deserted before this, and now people are flocking back to the screens bathed in pink and black. What started out as a joke quickly became fuel for the hype train that is Barbenheimer. I am really excited to talk about both of these films, and much like how many suggest the order in watching said films, we will be starting with Oppenheimer, then Barbie. In a recent interview, Christoper Nolan mentioned that the best intended viewing experience for Oppenheimer should be on IMAX screens that support 70mm film. However, I'd argue that the Apple Watch screen is just as optimal. Sadly, there are no theaters of the same kind here in the Philippines, and if there were any, my broke ass couldn't even secure a ticket. Regardless, he was most definitely right. Oppenheimer, even in a regular cinema, feels so tactile, largely in part due to the sound design. Considering the context of the film, sound plays such a crucial role in the narrative as it immerses us in the wrath of Oppenheimer's creation and helps us recognize the hell that is later to ensue. As the explosions swallow the entirety of the screen, the practical effects complemented by the sound design make the experience much more visceral and haunting. However, Nolan's sound mixing in his past films such as Tenet is quite controversial to say the least, as the musical score and sound effects often overlap the dialogue, making it hard to understand and contextualize the narrative. In this case, it wasn't that much of an issue, but there would be a few instances that would be difficult to hear certain characters. Considering that this is a 3-hour-long saga of a character study, this can definitely affect the experience. Oppenheimer is primarily driven by the dialogue along the course of its 3-hour runtime. Despite this, Nolan manages the pacing masterfully as we shoot back and forth between Oppenheimer's lifetime. As we dive deeper into his psyche, we never paint him as a hero nor a villain, as we understand the internal conflicts that he constantly struggles with in his pursuit of greatness, which Nolan captures perfectly. The impending guilt and existential dread that Oppenheimer experiences is one that we can understand, which helps us humanize him by the end of the film. This was only made possible with Cillian Murphy's stellar performance. Nolan and Murphy have a long working relationship with one another, and he has finally graced the big screen as the main lead. Murphy doesn't aim to imitate, but to transform the character as his own. His rendition of Oppenheimer might be one of his strongest performances to date. It is also worth mentioning Robert Downey Jr.'s powerful performance as well. It is definitely a breath of fresh air to see him try different roles, as he is highly attached to the Iron Man name. Despite the numerous A-list celebrities within the cast such as Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Rami Malek, Josh Peck, and even Roderick at Nolan's disposal, they never overshadow but remain in the background, which reflects Nolan's restraint. Speaking of restraint, there were dozens of creative decisions that Nolan had made, which reminds us why he is the auteur that he is. An example of which was the scene where Oppenheimer is testing the prototype of the atomic bomb. To intentionally suppress the sound right after the explosion's impact and to insert Oppenheimer's infamous quote is just brilliant. It was at that moment that we realized that he had become death, the destroyer of worlds. After having watched Oppenheimer myself, I can confidently say that this is one of Christoper Nolan's strongest works in his entire filmography. Now, let's move on over to Barbie. As the Barbie adaptation announcement was released, I wasn't really interested. Not until Greta Gerwig was attached to the project alongside Noah Baumbach. This was a really big deal because they are responsible for a lot of my favorite films, which you may have heard of. such as Lady Bird, Little Women, Marriage Story, Frances Ha, and so much more. At first, I was skeptical of her transition from indie arthouse cinema to the mainstream, but I believed in her capabilities nonetheless. As time went on, they announced Margot Robbie had signed on the project alongside Ryan Gosling. This announcement alone had me hyped. Then they announced the involvement of Emma Mackey, Will Ferrell, Michael Cera, Kate McKinnon, Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish, 50/50, Ice Spice, and the list went on and on. Needless to say, my excitement has gone through the roof and there have been high expectations set for this film. But before diving into Barbie, I want to note that I am not the target demographic. The film obviously caters to a much younger female audience and I am but a 21-year-old straight male, so keep this in mind. It is so lovely to see that despite the film being tied to such a large and reputable brand such as Mattel, Gerwig's charm manages to shine through, and she isn't afraid to take such creative risks along the way. The attention to detail in almost every aspect of its production is insane. Barbie Land looks like a faithful recreation of every young girl's imagination of their dream playhouse. I specifically want to commend the production design and costume departments as they nailed the very look and feel of Barbie and her world. These departments are arguably one of the most important aspects in order to deliver an authentic Barbie movie. I just want to stress the genius of casting Margot Robbie as stereotypical Barbie, as it already has so many layers to it, which makes her perfect for the role. Throughout her filmography as an actress, she has continuously been subjected to scenes that involve some sort of sexual implication brought about by the male gaze from her former directors and producers. She has also become one of the most beautiful and iconic blonde actresses in all of Hollywood. Many look up to her for inspiration in terms of beauty and physique, but some have criticized her for the same reasons as well. Similarly, Barbie has constantly been criticized and sexualized because of her perfect image, which has set an unrealistic standard of beauty for young girls. Barbie is also one of the most recognizable and favored dolls in the world with her iconic blonde hair. With these parallels in mind, who better than Margot Robbie to represent Barbie as she breaks through these stereotypes and unrealistic standards of women, which I think resonates beyond the script and through her personal life. I also admire the film's self-awareness and casting Margot Robbie in a particular scene where stereotypical Barbie calls herself ugly. The fourth wall break to call that out was hilarious. And to think that there was a world where Amy Schumer was initially cast to play Barbie is questionable to say the least. Ryan Gosling stole the show and the entire playhouse, literally, with the whole patriarchy thing and the Kendom thing, you know. With his energetic presence on screen. See what I did there? I wasn't really the biggest Ryan Gosling fan because he often portrays and is typecast the same stoic role in most of his filmography. But since his role in The Nice Guys, I have been rooting for him since day one for another successful comedic role, as he has proved his range as an actor. Finally, I could confidently say that he is more than enough. He manages to pull off the comedic timing every single time this guy is on screen and fully recognizes the nuances of Gerwig and Baumbach's script. Barbie tells us a story that desperately needs to be told to the youth, especially to the younger girls of our time. This film provides us with a harsh reality check that life isn't always going to be about pink, positivity, and perfection. In a patriarchal society, women are often faced with constant everyday battles with themselves and society, may it be about unrealistic beauty standards or stereotypical societal expectations. Womanhood doesn't seem like the fantasy that it once was when you played with your own Barbie dolls in your childhood. However, just like how Barbie prefers to step and face the real world, the girls of our time must learn to face the brutal reality of real life while not letting go of that sparkle they once had. This film also tackles so much more concepts of feminism, gender roles, and existentialism altogether, which is pretty in your face in its presentation. However, many criticize the film for its lack of subtlety, which to me doesn't fully make any sense. Barbie is primarily targeted towards young and impressionable girls, and if it means that this form of presentation makes the message much more accessible, hasn't the film done its part already? For me, it just has the right amount of subtlety that any person from whatever background they may be from, man or woman, young or old, can profoundly reflect on the important message the film presents, which at its core is the human experience. As a big fan of Gerwig, my only other downside of this film is the absence of a Saoirse Ronan cameo. So that about wraps up my thoughts on the phenomenon that is Barbenheimer. This self-proclaimed event was such a blast. Get it? Cause Oppenheimer and Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Ever since day one, the transition from memes to box office success is a topic in and of itself that deserves its own video, but maybe for another day. Nonetheless, it was just really heartwarming to see people back into the theaters once again, but now with their vibrant hot pink and monotone outfits. Anyways, that's it for me today. Thanks for watching.